What's up, y'all? It's Nada, your favorite HR girly, coming to you again with another HR and career talk. Today, I'm going to talk about something that every manager is going to face at some point: workplace conflict. Now, my previous video, I talked about workplace conflict on the employee side, and I gave you tips on how you could handle it if you were ever to be in that situation, in that scenario. Now, as a manager, as a leader, you're going to have to approach it differently. So stay tuned so you can learn more on how to handle it, because it's a tough situation to be in. I understand, but I'm going to help you out with that. And how you handle it as a manager can make or break your team's vibe. So today I'm giving y'all some real deal tips on how to manage workplace conflict like a pro. So let's jump right on in. First, you want to set the tone early. First things first, as a manager, you set the tone for how conflict is handled on your team. If you create a culture where people feel comfortable addressing issues openly, you're already ahead of the game. Now, you don't have to wait for stuff to blow up. Let your team know it's okay to have differences. They just need to be handled with respect. So for example, you could say, we're all going to have differences, but let's address them openly and respectfully. My door's always open if you need to talk things out. Now, as a leader, as a manager, I get that you feel like, oh my gosh, I feel like a babysitter for adults. You're babysitting adults. And that's how it feels, honestly, because I always consider work just adult school, for real, because you have the similar people at work that you would in school. You have like the popular kids, the nerdy kids, the drama-filled kids, the class clowns, all of that. So work is just like school. But as a manager, as a leader, it's up to you to create that environment for your team. So me, for example, I've had both crappy, sucky supervisors, and I've had the best supervisors. Okay, so my crappy supervisor, I remember she threw papers at me. This was my first job that I ever held. It was not my first HR job. It was my first job. I was in accounts payables, and that environment was just toxic from the beginning to begin with. The leaders, the director, the supervisor of that team were just not really leaders. They were more bosses, or they were more managers, if anything, micromanagers at that, which is bad. But set the tone. So we couldn't go to them to help us out with any sort of conflict that we had. Let's say if it was with a client or anything, we felt like, oh my gosh, we're going to the principal's office and we're going to get yelled at instead. So we didn't feel that openness as a team to go to them for help. And they never gave us that feeling, and they never told us that either. And whenever they wanted to resolve any conflict with us, they would come at us in an aggressive way. So that right there created toxicity within the team and lasted in that job for 2.5 years. I don't know how I did it, but it was one of the worst jobs that I ever held, unfortunately. But then I had the flip of the coin, where I had the best boss that I've ever had still to this day. My first HR boss, she was amazing. From the first moment that I spoke to her, I felt like, is she joking? Is she for real? Is she really this nice? Or is she just playing and she's just acting? And I worked with her for 8 years, and I can tell you that I never saw her get mad or upset. She never raised her voice. Anytime that she would get upset, you could see it on her face, right? It was obvious that she would be upset about something, whatever, the situation would be. And she would just take time, breather away from the team and kind of gather herself together and then come to us with whatever, right, the situation is. Or if any time she ever had to address us on any certain situation, like I could speak for myself, she always came at me in a very respectful manner, always looking out for my well-being. I'm always coming from a stance of someone who is like, look, I want to address this situation with you, blah, 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 and let's figure out a way how we can make sure that this doesn't happen again. Is there any support that you need? Do you need any help? Let me know how I can help you so we could make sure that we're on the same page, so that way this doesn't happen again. And that really taught me how to become a manager. That really taught me how to be a leader. And that really taught me how to treat my team and how to treat people on my team because of that leader that we had. And I can tell you that our team, we were about 5 or 6 of us on that team, and we were a solid team. Like, we rarely had any sort of bickering or disagreements or anything like that. Like, we respected each other's opinions. We respected each other so much. I looked up to those ladies still to this day. We never came at each other in no type of aggressive way or anything like that, but it was because of our leader. The leader of the team, she never treated us in a bad or negative way, and she never set the bad example. Instead, it was a great example, and so I carry her dearly in my heart to this day. I always say she's my best supervisor. She's my mentor. She's such a great leader. And I always tell her anytime that I speak to her, I say, if I could be a third of a person of what you are, I think I've made it in life, because she's just that special, y'all. She really, really is. Love her dearly. I had a little break time. I needed some water. Now, number 2, don't wait, be proactive. Look, don't wait until conflict becomes a full-blown disaster. If you see tension building, don't just hope it'll go away on its own, because spoiler alert, it won't. Step in early and have that conversation. Trust me, it's easier to handle things when they're small. And as a leader, especially if you are involved and highly visible with your team, you can tell when things are shifting. You can tell when certain attitudes are changing or shifting. You can tell when there's tension in the room. You can really sense a lot of things, especially when you're a very highly involved supervisor or manager within your team. Where you guys are tight-knit, trust me, you can tell, you can feel it. Now, if you are a disengaged manager and you're having tension and conflict happening within your team and you're not handling it, you're losing control. And the last thing you want to do is lose control of your team, because then they're going to be coming for you. They're going to be talking about you as a leader. And you might think that you're off the hook, that, Joe and Bob, they're arguing, they're beefing amongst themselves. They're beefing amongst themselves. But trust me, if the rest of the team, if the rest of the group knows that Joe and Bob are arguing, you've got to know, then they know that you know, and you're not doing anything about it. Trust me, they have lost respect of you, and they're talking about you too. So you do not want to be one of those leaders, those bosses that just kind of let things slide and hope that things work themselves out, because you're doing a disservice to your team, and your team is not going to trust you. They're not going to respect you, and they're just going to feel like, okay, well, if I can't even go to my boss and expose what's going on, then who can I go to, And you don't want that sort of reputation amongst your team, because trust me, people talk, and that reputation is just going to stick with you, and nobody wants that. Always remember to just nip it in the bud as soon as it evolves, as soon as it becomes anything. Become the mediator if you need to. Have, a conversation between them. Don't call them out in front of the whole group, in front of the whole team, because now you have put them on the spot and you're going to make them feel some type of way. So do not ever, if you need to address anything, do not ever address it in front of a group. Always in a private setting. Which leads me to my next tip of create a safe space for discussion. When you're handling conflict, you want to create a safe space for folks to talk things out. This means private meetings. No public call-outs. Let your employees know that the conversation is confidential and you're there to help. Do not take sides and do not place any blame. So for example, you can say, we're here to find a solution, not to point fingers. Let's work through this together. When your team sees that you care for the well-being of the team and try to find a solution to the problems, to the issues that have arisen, trust me, your team is going to want to fix it. But if things do not get discussed, if they just get pushed under the rug, if they just are seen as like, oh, they're going to get handled on their own, trust me, your team is not going to like it and your team is going to suffer. The team morale is going to suffer and it's going to be hard to rebuild on that team morale. Trust me, I've seen it plenty of times and people are not going to respect you. People are going to fear you, but they're not going to respect you. Or people may not even fear you at all, and they just won't respect you. So you got to pick your battles sometimes. You got to pick and choose, and you have to have a different mentality. Shift your mentality. If your mentality is a type where it's like, I got to call people out, I got to call them on the spot and all that, I do not recommend that because you are definitely going to be losing points from your team, cool points. And nobody wants to lose cool points. I think we all want to be cool, right? We want to be respected, but we don't want to be feared. And it's kind of like with our parents. So like if you grew up with really strict parents or you grew up with parents that were always calling you out in front of your family members, in front of your friends, and they were always pointing out your flaws or pointing out certain things that just made you feel uncomfortable or embarrassed, you would grow to have some sort of resentment towards that parent where you'll be like, oh my gosh, like I can't even say or do anything because my mom, my dad, my whoever is always going to be calling me out and they always do that to me and blah, blah. So you don't want to be that person at work doing that because no one likes that. That's not a good feeling. Now, tip number 4, you want to be the neutral party. Okay, so this is a huge one. Staying neutral. I get it. Sometimes it's hard. Being in the middle, it sucks. I know you might have your own opinions, but as a manager, you need to leave that at the door. Your role is to focus on the facts and how the conflict is impacting the team. Don't take sides because once you start to take sides, you're going to make either person, whoever side you're not on, you're going to make them feel smaller. They're going to feel belittled. They're going to feel disrespected and they're going to feel that you have favoritism and all of that. So even if you do feel that one or the is right over the other or has a better case over the other, whatever, don't show that and don't say that to anyone, especially within that mediation, because you're not there for that. You're not there to say who's right, who's wrong. You're not there for it. You're there to find a solution, to find a common ground. You're there to see how we can agree to disagree. You're there to see how the situation can get resolved without it escalating to HR, without it escalating to any sort of physical altercation or termination or anything like that. It's like, how can we resolve this? All right. So you could say something like, I get where you're coming from, but let's stick to how this is affecting the team and the work at hand. So always try to find ways on how to keep it on a very neutral ground, because if you're there as a referee, like waiting to see who's winning and then to call out the winner, you're just going to create an even worse situation and an even worse environment within the team. And you are not going to be manager of the year. Best believe that. You are going to be the manager of hell. People are not going to want to work with you and your reputation is going to follow, where people are going to be like, yeah, if his or her department has a job opening, don't apply because they suck as a manager. They don't know how to manage their team, or they don't know how to act, or they have favorites, or whatever it is. You don't want that. That's the last thing you want people to know about you. Tip number 5, encourage collaboration over competition. Sometimes conflict happens because people feel like they're competing with each other. As a manager, it's your job to shift that mindset. So you got to encourage collaboration. Get your team working together instead of against each other. It's kind of like in a relationship, right? So especially like if a relationship is going through a rough patch and they go see a counselor and they're talking about their situation, their relationships, their ups and downs. And then the counselor says to them, okay, well, and remember, you're partners, you're a team, you're working together, not against each other. You're supposed to be picking up each other's weight. You know, when you lack in this area, then I could pick you up. And when I lack in certain areas, then you can pick me up, and, you know, that sort of thing. So that's exactly how the work environment is. You're all not going to have the same skill set, the same qualities, the same characteristics. That's what makes a team great, because everyone has to play a part. When you look at teams, basketball teams, soccer teams, football teams, baseball, hockey, the list goes on. There are different people playing different positions, right? Why are there different positions? Because in order to win, even though we're not winning in this case, but in order to win, in order to be competitive, and in order to be able to get to what your goal is, different people need to play their part. People need to play their role. A team, a work environment team, is just as a sports team. Different people play different roles in order for the team to function, in order for the team to meet certain goals, in order for the team to be successful. So no, everyone should not be the same. We should not all think alike. We should not all act the same. We should not all have similar qualities and characteristics, because then that just means that our team is not going to be moving forward. We're not going to be an innovative team. We're not going to be a cohesive team, because we're all going to be competing for the same spot. And not just that, but when you have different people that bring different qualities on a team, it's like a puzzle where every puzzle plays a part, and when that puzzle is complete, you could see the full picture of, wow, that was very beautiful, that's a cool picture to see, right? So a team is just like that, where everyone is a puzzle piece. Each puzzle piece fits in the way that it should. They play a part in that, and in the end of it all, it's a beautiful thing. It's just magical. Right? So you want to make sure that as a manager that you encourage that collaboration with your team, and don't say to your team, yeah, so-and-so is better because she knows Excel better than blah, blah. You know, you don't want to say that, like, Joanne is better at Excel over Alicia. Like, Alicia sucks at Excel. You don't want to say stuff like that, because now you've made Alicia feel some type of way where she's feeling like, dang, you called me out. Like, why would you say something like that? I know I suck in Excel, but damn, do you got to call me out like that? So don't do that. So don't put your team members against each other. Instead, say, well, you know, we've got this project going on, and because Joanne is great in Excel, we're going to have her manage the reports. Alicia, you're great on the creative side, so now you're going to do the marketing, the sales sort of aspect, you know, so that way everyone feels like they're playing a role, and you're using their strengths, their skill set that they offer for that team to function. You don't want to put them against each other, because then that's where you're just going to create the conflict or make it worse. So you want to say something like, let's see how we can combine your ideas and come up with something that works for both of you. So like I said, you're not always going to be on the same page with your team. Your team, they're going to be different pages within each other. But how can you come to, at the end of it, to an agreement? Tip number 6, address the behavior, not the person. This next one's important. Focus on the behavior, not the person. Saying things like, you're always negative, is a straight up attack. Instead, call out specific actions and talk about how those behaviors are impacting the team. Now, I will say that we're humans, and so we know that we say certain things out of emotion, out of anger, whatever it is. I mean, I've done it. I've said things myself too, where later on I'm like, dang, I shouldn't have said that. Now, that was mean of me. Like, sometimes my mouth could be a little lethal. I get it. But then also I tend to watch what I say, and first, before I speak, try to think about what I'm going to say, how I'm going to say it, and be mindful of my tone, my body language, my eye contact, things like that, because all of that does matter. So when you could say something like, when meetings are interrupted, it slows down progress. Let's work on finding a better way to share ideas. So you're not calling them out necessarily to say like, okay, you're always being negative, or you're always calling certain things out. Instead, it's like, how can we, instead of going back and forth, how can we work on finding a better way to share ideas. Instead of interrupting, let's find a peaceful way to move forward. So you want to make sure that, especially if it's amongst a team, sometimes it's best to just generalize it instead of calling out the specific person, unless that person is more of like a heckler, or that person is someone that really is interrupting the progress or the work environment. Then yes, then you want to directly address that with them. Number 7, offer solutions, but then let them lead. I know it's tempting to jump in and fix everything, but it's way better if you guide your employees to find their own solutions. Give them space to take ownership. You can offer suggestions, but let them take the lead. This was something that I learned from Olivia. That was my first HR boss. Shout out to Olivia. I love her to this day. She is such a great person. But that was something that I really admired about her, and I have learned that. I've taken that in, where if I ever came up with some sort of roadblock, any conflict in the workplace with, let's say, a hiring manager or anything like that, and I would go to her and I would vent, and she would say, okay, she would hear me out, and, she was always nodding, and she, body language was on point, letting me know that, okay, I've heard you. And then she would reiterate, okay, so this is what I've heard you say. And then she would paraphrase, she would summarize whatever my venting session was about. And then she would throw it back at me. So how can you fix it? And the first time that she said that to me, I was like, aren't you my boss? Aren't you supposed to fix it for me? Like, aren't you supposed to jump in there for me and speak up for me and take for me and let them know, like, don't talk to her like that, or don't play with Nada like that? Or, the first time I was like, what do you mean that I gotta do the talking? But that taught me to be a problem solver. It taught me to think on my own. She taught me to handle my own situations. Of course, to the extent, what extreme that was necessary. She would always definitely get involved wherever needed. She never left me alone, stranded on an island. She was always right there, handing me the life vest if I needed it. But what she was teaching me was, listen, you're a big girl. You're an adult. You can figure these things out, especially if they are figure-outable. That's not even a word, but you get what I'm saying. So she taught me that, where it was like, okay, how can I handle this? How can I fix it? So anytime after that, before I went to her, I would still have my venting session, but in my mind, I would already kind of come prepared with a game plan for a solution. So when she asked me that question, okay, all right, so this is what I heard you say, etc., etc. How are you going to resolve it? Then I would say to her, well, I'm thinking about doing X, Y, Z, da, 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 da. And, what do you think? Do you think, yeah? And if she agreed with whatever my resolution was, she would totally agree and give me the green light. Or she'll add on to it and say, okay, well, I think that's good. That's a start. And then how about we add this? And then she would give me her feedback, her opinion, and blah, blah, blah. And then that was something that I learned with my team. So as I started becoming a leader and growing and having my own team, forming my own team, that was something that I would throw back to my team as well. And I would use it with my team, where it was like, it's not that I'm not trying to help you resolve it. I am trying to help you resolve it, but I'm trying to make sure that you understand that you've got the tools, you've got it, I trust and believe in you. And so that's exactly what I learned that Olivia was doing with me. So I learned that from her from a very, very young age, and I still hold that still to this day. So something that you can say is, so what do you think we can do to make sure this doesn't happen again? Empower them to come up with their own solution. That's ultimately what it is, just the empowerment. Now, tip number 8, know when to escalate. Now, let's be real. Sometimes conflict gets too big for you to handle alone. If it's affecting the whole team, getting toxic, or crossing legal lines like harassment, racism, bullying, then it's time to call in HR or higher management. There's no shame in getting help when it's needed. And listen, that sometimes could be uncomfortable as a manager, and sometimes you may feel like, oh my gosh, if I call HR for help and letting them know of what the situation is happening, what's going on in my team, or leadership, they're going to think that I'm not a compatible manager, a compatible leader, that I'm not fit for this role. But that's far from it. Okay, that is far from the truth. Let me tell you that we do not think, what? Oh my gosh, you suck as a manager. You don't even know how to control your team. No. Now, when we do think that you suck as a manager is when the entire team is complaining about you because you're not handling the situation as it arises. Now, that's when we will have to say, hey, you might need some leadership training. You need to go to some manager classes. So that's when we're thinking, yeah, you need help. But if it's those one-offs where, your team, they're just not getting along and it is what it is, then what else are we going to do? We're not going to do anything else about that. What we could say is something like, it's just better to bring in reinforcements than let things get out of control. Because the last thing that you want is for things to really get out of control and for people to get physical. You don't want some sort of lawsuit in place or anything like that, because trust me, lawsuits are not fun. Companies hate lawsuits, so definitely we do not want lawsuits. Number 9, follow up. Don't assume it's over. After the conflict seems resolved, don't just assume that everything's good to go, that it's peaches and cream. No. Check in with the employees involved. A simple follow-up can help ensure the conflict doesn't resurface or simmer under the surface. So you want to ask something like, how's everything going since we talked? Anything else we need to cover or to address? So showing your team that you also are checking in lets them feel like you care, that you actually want to see them succeed, or you want the best for the team, and that you want to make sure that you handle it, that you resolve it. And ultimately, that's just what people want. They just want to make sure that they are seen and being heard. So make sure to check in, follow up with your team. And then my last tip is lead by example. I think I shared with you already how my previous bosses, how they led by example, both on the negative side and on the great side of things. So definitely lead by example is my last tip, but I will say it's the first one that you should really think about. Your team is watching you and how you handle conflict. If they see you staying calm, respectful, and focused on solutions, they'll be more likely to do the same. So show them how it's done. All right, y'all, that's it for today's video. Remember, as a manager, handling conflict isn't about avoiding it or sweeping it under the rug. It's about creating a healthy environment where differences can be worked through and resolved. All right, y'all. That's it for today's video. Remember, as a manager, handling conflict isn't about avoiding it or sweeping it under the rug. It's about creating a healthy environment where differences can be worked through and resolved. If you've got any tips or stories about managing conflict, drop them in the comments, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out ever on another HR or career tip from me. See y'all in the next one.